Peppa and George lost in the woods. The big adventure.
The picnic. It was a bright morning at the pig family's house. The sun shone brilliantly in the blue sky, and birds were singing outside the window. The flowers in Mommy Pig's garden were blooming, filling the air with a light spring fragrance. Inside the house, Peppa and George were finishing breakfast. Mommy Pig had prepared toast with jam, fresh orange juice, and a bowl of fruit.
I have a wonderful idea for today. How about we go for a picnic in the woods?
Mommy Pig said, smiling as she cleaned up the table.
A picnic in the woods? I love picnics.
Peppa shouted, jumping with joy. George, holding his toy dinosaur, looked excited too. He murmured, as always, his eyes shining with enthusiasm.
Dinosaur!
Daddy Pig, sitting in his armchair reading the newspaper, lowered his glasses and looked at his family.
A picnic? Great idea, Mommy Pig. There's nothing better than a day outdoors to relax.
Mommy Pig started preparing the picnic basket with fresh sandwiches, fruits, juice, and the famous chocolate cake that Peppa and George loved so much. Peppa and George, eager for the outing, helped as much as they could arranging the utensils and napkins.
Can we bring toys?
Peppa asked, holding her teddy while George held his dinosaur.
Of course, but don't forget to bring water to keep us hydrated,
replied Mommy Pig. Finally, the basket was ready, and Daddy Pig grabbed the car keys.
Is everyone ready?
He asked.
Yes!
Peppa and George shouted together, running towards the door, and everyone got into the car. The pig family car drove along the road through nature, leading to the forest near the town where Peppa and her family lived. Along the way, the pink piglet and George looked at the scenery, admiring the trees that grew more numerous as they neared the picnic area. Small hills covered in wildflowers passed quickly as the car continued on its way. Finally, Daddy Pig stopped the car in a quiet clearing surrounded by large trees that seemed to reach the sky in the eyes of the pink piglet and her younger brother.
We've arrived. This is the perfect spot for our picnic,
Daddy Pig said, stretching his arms as he stepped out of the car. Mommy Pig opened the picnic basket and began setting everything up on a large checkered blanket.
Can I play on the grass, Mommy?
Peppa asked, her eyes shining with the anticipation of an adventure.
You may, Peppa, but stay close and take George with you,
replied Mommy Pig, while she took the sandwiches out of the basket. Peppa and George ran around, laughing and jumping with excitement. The field around them was filled with colorful flowers and little butterflies fluttering from flower to flower. The tall, sturdy trees created a natural canopy over the clearing, filtering the sunlight into small beams that lit up the forest floor. Meanwhile, Mommy Pig arranged the items Daddy Pig had taken from the car. Then, a bee started buzzing around Daddy Pig, who began to run, afraid of getting stung. Daddy Pig always ends up in the worst situations, doesn't he? The forest. While their parents were busy with the bee, the two little piglets were playing together. But at a certain point, Peppa stopped and began to think. She then looked at George and said,
Come on, George. On the way here, I think I saw a muddy puddle in that direction.
Peppa took her little brother's hand, and they started walking toward the forest, while Daddy and Mommy Pig were distracted by the bee. The path was narrow, with tree roots sticking out from the ground and dry leaves forming a soft layer underfoot. The fresh forest air surrounded them, filled with the scent of damp earth and the aroma of flowers growing among the trees. Peppa and George were fascinated by the sounds of birds and insects accompanying them as they walked, and our little protagonist pointed out different animals, trees, and flowers, trying to teach her brother everything she knew about nature.
Look, George, that's a very old tree. I bet it's been here for many years,
said Peppa. But George, always obsessed with dinosaurs, was paying attention to something else. He saw something small and green moving quickly through the leaves.
Dinosaur!
George shouted, letting go of Peppa's hand and running after a small lizard that had appeared.
George, come back!
Peppa shouted, running after her brother. The little lizard, agile and quick, moved skillfully through the leaves and branches, with the determined little piglet in close pursuit. Peppa tried to catch up, but George was fixated on the idea that the lizard was actually a tiny dinosaur. This caused the two little siblings to wander further and further away from the picnic spot without even realizing it. After a few minutes of running, Peppa finally caught up with George and took his hand. The two stopped, panting, and looked around. The trees around them were much denser now, and she could no longer see the picnic field.
Oh no, we're lost, George,
Peppa said, her eyes wide with worry. George looked at Peppa, confused, still holding his toy dinosaur. Meanwhile, back in the clearing, Daddy Pig had finally managed to get rid of the bee. Then, Mommy Pig noticed that Peppa and George were nowhere to be seen, and she called their names. When she didn't hear a response, she began to worry. It had been quite some time since the children had gone off to play, and they hadn't returned.
Daddy Pig, where are Peppa and George? They've been gone a while.
Mommy Pig said, looking anxiously toward the forest. Daddy Pig, who was lying on the blanket with a hat over his face, tired from all the running, sat up slowly.
Oh, they must be exploring nearby. Don't worry.
But after a few more minutes without any sign of the children, Mommy Pig started to get genuinely worried.
We need to find them. They might be lost.
Mommy Pig said. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Daddy Pig agreed, and they took out their phones. Mommy Pig called Miss Rabbit, asking her to help find the two little piglets with her helicopter. Of course, Miss Rabbit answered promptly and headed towards the forest area to fly over it. Meanwhile, Daddy Pig called the police station to request help from Officer Panda and Officer Squirrel, who took their patrol car and drove to the road near the forest to look for Peppa and George as well. Deeper in the forest, Peppa and George were trying to find their way back, but everything looked the same. Each tree seemed identical to the last, and the forest, which once felt friendly, now seemed mysterious and a little scary. Still, Peppa tried to stay calm, not wanting to frighten George. The pirate Peppa and George kept walking, hoping to find their parents. Since they didn't see anyone around, they began calling for Mommy and Daddy Pig, but all they heard in response were the sounds of birds and a few animals scurrying along the forest floor. It was starting to get more and more frightening. Suddenly, they heard a sound they recognized from a time when they were at Grandpa Pig's house, where the two siblings were digging with their grandpa and found some really cool things like a Viking coin and a dinosaur bone. And that's exactly what they were hearing now, something that sounded a lot like a shovel digging, just like that day. Looking to the side, the kids saw some footprints and decided to follow them. Coming out from behind a bush, Peppa and George came face to face with a man with a red beard, wearing a hat with a skull and crossbones, holding a shovel, and standing by a small hole in front of him.
Who are you?
Peppa whispered, scared of what she might hear. To her surprise, the pirate was trying to dig up a treasure he had buried there a long time ago to hide it from the police, just like what happened the last time.
Ahoy, little piggies. What are you doing here all by yourselves?
The pirate said with a mischievous smile, trying to hide his shovel so the kids wouldn't notice he was digging up his treasure.
We're lost. George saw a lizard and thought it was a dinosaur, so we wandered away from our parents. We came for a picnic, but now we're hungry since we haven't eaten anything,
Peppa said. The pirate scratched his beard and looked around.
Well, looks like you've had quite an adventure. But don't worry, I can help.
He said as he stuck his shovel back into the ground. The pirate then took out a piece of chocolate cake he still had saved and shared it with Peppa and George, who split it and ate together.
What were you doing with that shovel? Are you looking for coins or dinosaur bones?
Peppa asked curiously. The pirate was surprised by the question, but quickly replied,
Yes, of course. I was searching for dinosaur bones. But now, let's get you back safely to your parents.
The rescue. The pirate knew the forest well, since he had a map in his hands, and with that, he could lead the children back to where Daddy and Mommy Pig were. So off they went, the three of them, holding hands and looking for their parents. As the pirate led the way, they began to hear the sound of a helicopter flying over the forest. It was Miss Rabbit, who had been called to help search for Peppa and George. From above, she spotted them walking with the pirate. Miss Rabbit called over the radio. Officer Panda and Officer Squirrel received the news and quickly headed to the location. When they arrived at the clearing, they found Peppa, George, and the pirate walking back. Then they said,
Thank goodness we found you, kids. Your parents were very worried. And who are you, sir?
Officer Panda asked, looking at the pirate.
I was just helping these little ones who got lost.
He said with a grin. Peppa, always brave, stepped forward.
It's true. He helped us find our way back to the picnic,
She said.
Oh, thank you so much, sir. As a token of our gratitude, please accept a ride back to town. It's much too far to walk.
Officer Panda said.
No need.
The pirate replied, having left his shovel and map behind as he helped Peppa and George.
It's the least we can do, sir. Come along with us.
The officer insisted. After that, Peppa and George were taken back to the clearing, where Mommy and Daddy Pig were waiting, relieved.
You gave us quite a scare.
Mommy Pig said, hugging them tightly.
It was a big adventure, Mommy. We met a pirate, and he was digging for dinosaur bones.
Peppa said. Daddy Pig smiled.
Well, after all that adventure, I think we deserve some chocolate cake, don't you?
Everyone sat around the blanket and began to enjoy the picnic. The The sun was starting to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The forest's tranquility returned, and the surroundings were once again friendly and inviting. As they ate, Peppa and George recounted every detail of their adventure and how the pirate had helped them. After everyone had eaten and chatted for a while, the pig family got into their car and headed home. Officer Panda and Officer Squirrel took the pirate back to the city, dropping him off at the police station. As they said goodbye to the pig family children's great benefactor, Officer Panda remarked,
I feel like I've seen you somewhere before. Have you ever been here looking for something you lost? We even have a treasure someone from town found, and no one's ever come to claim it.
My treasure is here? Yes, it's mine.
exclaimed the pirate.
Oh, we finally found the owner of this treasure, Officer Squirrel. What a relief.
So the pirate received his treasure, left the station, and returned to the sea once again. That day, Peppa and George learned an important lesson. Adventures can be exciting, but it's always important to stay close to their parents. The forest is full of surprises, but it can also be dangerous. And of course, a little bit of chocolate cake at the end makes everything better. In addition, the pirate also learned that helping kids is way more important than digging for treasure, especially if the police are keeping your other treasure safe for you. And so ended another exciting day for the pig family, full of laughter, adventure, and a story that will be remembered for a long time. Subscribe to our channel if you want to explore the enchanted world of Peppa Pig with us. We've also left 2 really fun Peppa videos for you to watch right now. Just pick the one you want to see first.